Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we are doing a top-down teardown of one of history's absolute heavyweights, the Mughal Empire. We're going to journey all the way from the awe-inspiring, glittering spectacle of the royal courts right down into the gritty administrative nuts and bolts that kept this massive machine running. Here is our roadmap for today's Explainer. We'll start with travelers and cities, move into art and literature, uncover society's reality, dive deep into administration and land, and finally, we'll wrap up with the economy and coins. All right, Section 1, Travelers and Cities, the Outsider's Gaze. Imagine you're an outsider stepping into this empire for the very first time. The sheer scale was just staggering. You actually have the English traveler Ralph Fitch claiming that Agra and Fatehpur Sikri were physically larger than London. Meanwhile, Francois Bernier stated flat out that Delhi was not less than Paris. Juxtaposing the immense wealth of these Mughal trading centers against the largest cities in Europe at the time really puts into perspective how overwhelming this empire was to an outsider. Now, we get all these different puzzle pieces from various travelers that help us build a complete picture. While Thomas Coryat gave us really crucial insights into Jahangir's character, John Fryer documented the rise of Shivaji over in Bombay and Surat. Ralph Fitch, like we just mentioned, detailed the immense city of Agra. And then you have Giovanni Carrieri focusing on the complex intricacies of Aurangzeb's military organization. When you snap these distinct observations together, a really vibrant, multidimensional picture of Mughal India begins to emerge. Moving right along to Section 2, Art and Literature, Documenting Legacy. So, I want you to consider a specific question here. How exactly did the Mughal rulers visually cement their psychological and political dominance? Because if you think about the strategic purpose behind courtly art, it wasn't just mere decoration, right? It was highly calculated messaging. The answer really lies in strategic masterpieces like Abul Hassan's famous painting, Jahangir's Dream. In it, Emperor Jahangir stands dominantly on a lion, while his geopolitical rival Shah Abbas is standing somewhat vulnerably on a sheep. The crazy part? Jahangir literally commissioned this painting after having a dream about his rival, specifically to visually project his superiority. You also see fascinating elements in it like a globe and European-influenced angelic halos. It's just brilliant strategic messaging, using European artistic influences to project absolute divine power. But obviously, it wasn't just visual art. This empire was way too massive to rely on just one centralized history book, so they depended on extensive regional texts to document their territories. Over in Bengal, they used the Siyar-ul-Mutakirin, while Kashmir's history was captured in the Tariq-i-Rashidi, written by Mirza Haidar. Down in Bijapur, the Muhammadnama was essential, and the Mirati-Ahmadi thoroughly covered Gujarat. This widespread literary effort ensured their legacy was quite literally written into the fabric of every single region they touched. Which brings us to Section 3, Society and Living Standards, the stark reality. Okay, let's peel back the curtain a bit here because we have to look past the dazzling wealth of the courts. Listen to this direct observation straight from Babur. He noted, peasants and people of low standing were mostly naked. Men wore langauts and women wore saris. Other travelers even noted that workers were often completely barefooted and lacked sufficient clothing to survive the winter. This heavily contrasts the unimaginable riches of the elite with a systemic lack of basic necessities among the laborers who actually built the empire. So why was there such a massive gap? Well, Francois Bernier proposed a pretty fascinating thesis. He argued that Mughal India fundamentally lacked private land ownership. In his view, this destroyed any incentive to improve the land or increase production, unlike in Europe where he believed private property was the main driver of prosperity. He noted that without private property, farmers and artisans had absolutely zero incentive to improve their output, simply because the state or the ruling class would just take all the profit anyway. Let's dig into how they handled that in Section 4, Administration and Land, the Engine Room. To manage that kind of massive agricultural output, the Aini Akbari laid out a highly sophisticated land classification system. You've got Palaj, which was their most productive land cultivated annually. Then Parauti, which was left fallow temporarily just to regain its strength. Chichar was rested for 3 to 4 years, and finally Banjar was uncultivated land left alone for 5 or more years. This system was brilliant because it allowed the administration to accurately track, predict, and tax agricultural output based on the precise health of the soil. And governing all of this was the Mansabdari system. Now, Mansab basically just means a rank. Under this system, Zat determined the rank, prestige, and salary of a noble. So the higher your Zat, the greater your prestige. Meanwhile, Sawar defined their exact cavalry and military responsibilities, specifically dictating exactly how many horsemen they were required to maintain. This intricate balancing act managed the entire flow of nobility, which, by the way, expanded from just 29 high-ranking nobles under Akbar all the way up to 79 under Aurangzeb. And this hierarchy bled into some very distinct, highly specialized administrative roles to keep the military and the state running smoothly. The Mir Atish commanded the massive artillery. The Mir Behar was in charge of the navy and the river fleets. You had the Mir Bakshi, handling military offenses and troop oversight, while the Wakia Novice meticulously managed all the royal correspondence. Every single role was a critical gear turning inside the empire's vast engine room. Finally, Section 5, the Mughal economy. The literal lifeblood of this entire operation was, of course, a constantly evolving coinage system. Starting back in the Sher Shah era, we see the introduction of the silver rupeya weighing exactly 178 greens, which is actually the direct precursor to the modern rupee. Moving into the early Mughal era, gold coins called mohor and copper coins called dam were fueling everyday commerce. By the time we get to the Aurangzeb era, the empire had achieved a highly standardized coin format that incorporated the ruler's name, the exact mint location, and the date of issue. It really is a masterclass in economic control and standardizing a massive economy over time. So as we wrap up today's explainer, I really want to leave you with a provocative thought to chew on. Did the unimaginable wealth of the Mughal courts actually plant the seeds of its own decline through systemic poverty and a fundamental lack of property rights? We've explored the spectacular art, the highly sophisticated administration, and these vastly populated cities, but we've also uncovered the stark, barefoot reality of the commoners and those heavy economic critiques from travelers like Bernier. I challenge you to consider how this profound juxtaposition, this grand administrative spectacle right next to impoverished reality, ultimately shaped the fate of the empire. Thank you so much for joining me, and as always, keep exploring.